A shy hotel cleaner answered a call in Chinese in front of a CEO. The next day, he sent for her. Have you ever felt something inside you desperately trying to break free? A talent hidden away while you move through life, invisible to everyone else? This is Lin Wei's story. A woman whose greatest gift remained secret until one afternoon when courage found her, if only for a moment. In San Francisco's prestigious Horizon Hotel, a 5-star establishment where tech moguls and venture capitalists shaped industries, Lin moved like a shadow. At 26, she pushed her cleaning cart with practiced efficiency. Head down, shoulders hunched. She had perfected invisibility, not from confidence, but from fear of being judged. What hotel guests never guessed was that behind Lin's downcast eyes lived a mind that traveled between worlds. For 5 years, she had bridged cultures from her small apartment. It began after immigrating from Shanghai, leaving behind her grandmother, Lin Wei, whose life had been defined by resilience and sacrifice. Education is the one thing no one can take from you, Lin would tell Lin. But economic realities had forced Lin to abandon her linguistic studies and take whatever work she could find. The night after landing in America, Lin had looked at her grandmother's worn copy of American poetry she'd brought along. "I'll make you proud, Nai," she whispered, tears falling onto the yellowed pages. Unable to afford university, Lin downloaded language apps and began practicing her English while maintaining her native Mandarin. What started as necessity became passion. Over 5 years, she had mastered idiomatic expressions, business terminology, and technical vocabulary through online forums and language exchange programs. Both languages captivated her, each with its own rhythm, each with its own logic. But no one at Horizon Hotel knew this side of her. To coworkers, she was quiet Lin, who took unwanted shifts. To Rebecca Winters, the hotel's operations manager, she was barely furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. "Lin," Rebecca's sharp voice would cut through staff hallways. "The executive floor needs refreshing, and the conference suite needs set up for tomorrow. The Vertex Technologies people are particular." Lin would nod, never mentioning she could discuss artificial intelligence trends or explain startup investment strategies fluently in both English and Mandarin. Who would believe her? Who would care? Only Miguel, the 58-year-old maintenance supervisor with calloused hands and perceptive eyes, seemed to see something in Lin. "You know your problem, Mija," he said once, finding her reading business news in both languages during her break. "You've got brilliance inside you, but you're walking around like you're made of dust. The world won't see what you don't show it." Lin quickly hit her phone. "It's just a pastime, Miguel." His eyes crinkled with frustration. "The things you're best at might never be seen, but don't let them die in silence. That would be the real tragedy." Little did Lin know that within 24 hours those words would echo as her carefully constructed invisibility came crashing down. Beginning with a phone call no one at Horizon Hotel was prepared to answer. No one except the woman who cleaned rooms while dreaming in 2 languages. What would you do if your moment arrived unexpectedly? Would you step forward or back? Sometimes life's greatest opportunities arrive disguised as moments of terror. For Lin Wei, that moment was coming. If you want to discover how a single act of courage changed everything for this invisible woman, stay with us. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary people, those we pass daily without truly seeing. What would you do if you were in Lin's position? Would you find the courage to step forward when every instinct tells you to stay hidden? The morning of the Vertex Technologies conference, Lin arrived early. The hotel buzzed with activity, preparing for 40 international executives and investors. Rumors spread Jackson Chen himself would attend, the Chinese-American CEO known for revolutionizing cloud computing and his demanding standards. "Everyone needs to be at their absolute best," Rebecca announced at the staff meeting, her gaze lingering on Lin. "And these people expect perfection. Stick to your assigned duties and nothing else." Lin nodded, feeling a familiar ache, another reminder of her place. As the meeting dispersed, she overheard Rebecca speaking to Mark, the front desk manager. "Put Lin on the 20th floor today," Rebecca said loudly. "That's where most of the Chinese delegates are staying. At least if she's up there, guests won't have to deal with the language barrier with our regular staff." Lin's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down. If only Rebecca knew. But why would it matter? Lin had resigned herself to underestimation long ago as she pushed her cart toward the service elevator. Miguel appeared beside her. "Heard you got the executive floor," he said casually. "The universe has a funny way of putting us exactly where we need to be, doesn't it?" Lin frowned. "It's just Rebecca being Rebecca. She thinks I'm up there because I look Chinese." Miguel chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe something interesting will happen up there." The elevator arrived and Miguel stepped back. "Remember what I said, kid. Don't die in silence." The 20th floor was quieter than expected. Most guests were at the conference, allowing Lin to work efficiently, occasionally switching between English and Mandarin phrases to herself. In room 2012, she found a business magazine open on the desk. Jackson Chen stared from the glossy page, his expression serious but with thoughtful eyes. The headline read, "Vertex Technologies expanding into emerging markets. CEO emphasizes cross-cultural communication as key strategy." By afternoon, Lin moved to cleaning the executive lounge, a quiet space where conference attendees could retreat. She worked methodically, assuming she was alone. Then she heard a voice. "No, that's not what I'm saying at all." A man spoke urgently into his phone in English. "I understand there's a communication challenge, but this partnership is too important to fall apart over misunderstandings." Lin continued cleaning, trying not to eavesdrop, but the man's voice grew frustrated as he switched to halting basic Mandarin. "Ni ming bai ma? Do you understand?" "No, that's not right. Wo xiao? I need." He sighed heavily and returned to English. "This is ridiculous. I need someone who actually speaks fluent Mandarin right now." Through the door crack, Lin saw a tall man pacing, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. She recognized him from the magazine, Jackson Chen himself. "I'm losing the most important deal of the quarter because no one in this entire hotel speaks proper Mandarin," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Lin froze, heart pounding. She could help, but approaching Jackson Chen, drawing attention to herself, made her palms sweat. What if her business terminology wasn't perfect? What if he thought she was overstepping? What if he laughed at her presumption? Miguel's words echoed. "Don't let them die in silence." For 5 years, she'd carried her grandmother's dreams. For 5 years, she'd hidden her abilities, convinced they weren't good enough. And now, beyond that door was a moment that aligned perfectly with her hidden talent. Lin stood paralyzed between two forces, the lifetime habit of making herself small and the sudden desire to be brave just once. Jackson was practically shouting now, "Please, if there's anyone who can translate properly, this is urgent. The Huazhong Technologies call is about to drop, and we've spent months on this partnership." Lin took a deep breath, then another. Her hand trembled, reaching for the door. "I can't," she whispered. "I just can't." She turned away, ready to disappear down the hallway as thousands of times before. But seeing her reflection in the polished elevator doors, small, hunched, fading, she suddenly saw her grandmother's face filled with determination and sacrifice. Before she could reconsider, Lin turned back. Her feet carried her forward as if possessed by a will stronger than fear. "Excuse me," she said, her voice so soft Jackson didn't hear her. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Excuse me, Mr. Chen. I speak Mandarin. I could help if you want." Jackson turned, surprise evident as he took in her housekeeping uniform, the cart visible behind her. For a moment, Lin thought he might dismiss her, but desperation won over skepticism. "You speak Mandarin?" he asked uncertainly. Lin nodded, mouth dry. "Yes, fluently. I'm from Shanghai. I can translate for you if you'd like." Jackson hesitated briefly before extending the phone. "It's on speaker. The CEO of Huazhong Technologies is calling from Beijing. We're discussing final terms for a cloud infrastructure partnership, but something's been lost in translation." Lin's hands shook taking the phone. But when she began speaking Mandarin, everything changed. Her voice grew stronger, confident, the words flowing naturally as she introduced herself and explained the situation. The surprised voice from Beijing responded rapidly and formally, but Lin understood every nuance, nodding as she listened. For 20 minutes, Lin translated complex technical terms and business conditions between Jackson and CEO Zhang. The misunderstanding was clarified. Jiang believed Vertex was demanding exclusive rights to certain technologies when Jackson was actually offering non-exclusive licensing with preferential terms. Tensions eased. Even laughter emerged as cultural subtleties were properly explained. As the call concluded successfully with verbal agreement on next steps, Lin handed back the phone, suddenly aware of what she'd done. She had stepped out of shadows, made herself visible, and now Jackson Chen was looking at her, really looking at her, with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry for interrupting," she said quickly, backing toward the door. "I should get back to work." "Wait," Jackson said, but Lin was already retreating, her face burning with self-consciousness. "Thank you," he called after her, but she was gone, hurrying down service stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. For the rest of her shift, Lin alternated between exhilaration and terror. She had done it. For 20 precious minutes, she had been more than invisible. Been valuable, capable, needed. But as she finished her shift, reality settled back. Tomorrow she would return to being just Lin the cleaner. The moment would fade. Life would continue as before. Or so she thought. Until she found Miguel waiting at the employee exit, a knowing smile crinkling his face. "Heard something interesting happened upstairs today," he said casually. Lin tensed. "Who told you?" "Nobody needed to. It's all over your face," Miguel chuckled. "The question is, now that you've let that light shine for a minute, are you ready for what comes next?" "Nothing's coming next," Lin insisted, pulling her jacket tighter. "It was just a one-time thing." Miguel shook his head, eyes twinkling with something like pride. "Kid, when you strike a match in a dark room, people notice. You just lit yourself up for the whole world to see." As Lin walked to the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted beneath her ordinary life. For the first time in years, she felt both terrified and alive. She had no way of knowing that upstairs, Jackson Chen was making a phone call that would change everything. "Yes," he said, watching the San Francisco skyline from his suite. "I need information about one of your employees, a housekeeper who speaks fluent Mandarin and English. I believe I found something extraordinary hiding in plain sight." Morning arrived with a sense of unreality. Lin had barely slept, replaying yesterday's events, alternating between pride in her momentary courage and anxiety about consequences. What if she had overstepped? What if Jackson had complained? At work, everything seemed unnervingly normal. No one mentioned the incident. Even Rebecca treated her with the usual dismissive attitude. "Executive floor again?" Rebecca said, barely glancing at Lin. "And the Vertex Technologies people have requested their conference room be prepared by noon for a meeting. Make sure everything is immaculate." Lin nodded, relief washing over her. Perhaps Jackson hadn't mentioned the interaction. Perhaps it had meant nothing to him, just a convenient solution to a temporary problem. As she worked, Lin tried convincing herself that yesterday's bravery was an anomaly, a brief departure from safe invisibility. Yet something had changed inside her, a small flame refusing to be extinguished. While cleaning the mirror in room 2009, she caught sight of herself and paused. For the first time in years, she really looked at her reflection, not just checking for smudges, but seeing the person staring back. Her grandmother's eyes looked back, filled with a question Lin couldn't quite answer. "It doesn't change anything," she told her reflection. "One moment doesn't change a life." But as the words left her mouth, they felt hollow. Deep down, Lin knew some moments, rare as they might be, held power to change everything. At 11:45, Lin arrived at the conference room to prepare for the meeting. She worked efficiently, arranging notepads, filling water pitchers, adjusting chairs. As she finished, Rebecca entered with 2 senior hotel managers. "Good, you're almost done," Rebecca said critically. "The Vertex Technologies executive team will be here any minute. I need you to." The door opened and Jackson Chen walked in with 2 assistants. The hotel managers straightened, professional smiles appearing. "Mr. Chen," one began, "we trust everything has been satisfactory." Jackson nodded politely but seemed distracted, his eyes moving past them until landing on Lin, who was trying to make herself invisible near the service door. "Actually," he said, "there is something specific I wanted to discuss." Lin's heart dropped. Here it was, the complaint, the reprimand for stepping out of her place. "I had an extraordinary experience yesterday," Jackson continued. gaze fixed on Lin. One of your employees saved a multi-million-dollar deal through an exceptional display of linguistic and business communication skills. The hotel managers exchanged confused glances. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, the senior manager said. I'm not aware of any staff providing translation services. We have a professional service we can call when needed. You weren't aware? Jackson replied. Because the person who helped me wasn't from your translation service. She was from your housekeeping staff. All eyes turned to Lin, who wished the floor would swallow her whole. Rebecca gave a dismissive laugh. There must be some mistake. Our housekeeping staff doesn't. Lin, Jackson interrupted, addressing her directly. That is your name, correct? Lin nodded, unable to find her voice. Would you mind demonstrating your language skills again? Perhaps translate something I say to verify for your management. The room fell silent, all eyes on Lin. This was her feared moment, being put on display, judged, found wanting. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide, to deny everything. But something stronger held her in place. Perhaps the memory of those 20 minutes when she had been more than invisible, when her voice had mattered. Yes, I can do that. She managed. Voice barely audible. Jackson spoke several sentences about cloud computing infrastructure and market expansion strategy in English, then asked her to translate to Mandarin. With each word Lin translated with technical precision. The expressions around her transformed from skepticism to surprise to astonishment. When she finished, Jackson spoke in rapid Mandarin and Lin smoothly translated back to English. Perfect translation, Jackson said. Better than many professionals I've hired. Rebecca's face had drained of color. I had no idea, she stammered, shooting Lin a look mingling shock with resentment. Clearly, Jackson replied coolly. He turned back to Lin. How long have you been working as a housekeeper? 3 years at this hotel, sir. 2 years at another before that. And your background in languages? I studied linguistics in Shanghai for 2 years before coming to America. I couldn't afford to continue my education here. Jackson nodded as if reaching a decision. I have a proposition for you. My company is expanding into Asian markets, particularly China. We need people who understand not just language, but cultural nuances and business communication. People with natural ability and dedication. Lin stared, uncomprehending. I'd like to offer you a position, Jackson continued. Initially as a cultural liaison and translator for our international business development team. If that goes well, we can discuss a permanent role with Vertex Technologies. The room seemed to tilt. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. But I'm just she began. A remarkably talented individual who has been underestimated, Jackson finished. Including by yourself, it seems. Rebecca stepped forward, professional mask in place. Mr. Chen, while Lin's hidden talent is impressive, there are practicalities to consider. She has no corporate experience, no degree, no business training. Perhaps we could arrange a professional interpreter instead, someone more suitable for your executive environment. The implication hung in the air. Lin wasn't the right kind of person for Jackson's world. She belonged behind a cleaning cart. Lin felt herself shrinking, the familiar weight of inadequacy pressing down. Rebecca was right. Who was she to think she could step into such a role? But then Jackson spoke, cutting through Lin's spiral of self-doubt. Miss Winters, isn't it? He addressed Rebecca directly. Let me ask you something. Yesterday, when the call came from Beijing, where were your professional translators? Where was anyone willing to step forward and help? Rebecca had no answer. Lin was the only person who combined ability with initiative, Jackson continued. She saw a need and had the courage to fill it despite obvious personal discomfort. That's exactly the kind of person I want representing my company. He turned back to Lin, his expression softening. Of course, the decision is yours. This would be a significant change, and I understand if you need time to consider. Time seemed to stand still as Lin stood at the crossroads of her life. Before stretched two paths, the familiar road of invisibility, of safety and smallness, and the terrifying, exhilarating unknown of stepping into her full potential. She thought of her grandmother, who sacrificed so Lin could have opportunities, of Miguel's words about not dying in silence, of the person glimpsed in the mirror that morning, someone with her grandmother's eyes and untapped courage. I don't need time, Lin said, her voice steadier than expected. I would be honored to accept your offer. The words hung irrevocable. Lin had stepped off the edge of her small safe world into freefall. Jackson smiled. Excellent. We'll handle details with your management. I'd like you to join our strategy session this afternoon if possible. The senior hotel manager, quickly adapting, nodded enthusiastically. Of course, we'd be happy to release Lin from her duties immediately. Rebecca's face flushed with barely contained frustration. But what about her responsibilities here? We're already short-staffed, and replacing her on such short notice will be challenging but manageable, the manager cut in smoothly. We're all delighted for Lin, aren't we, Miss Winters? Rebecca's smile was tight. Of course. How fortunate for her. As the group dispersed to make arrangements, Lin found herself alone with Jackson. Thank you, she said, still processing everything. I don't understand why you'd take a chance on someone like me. Jackson studied her curiously. Someone like you? You mean someone who mastered multiple languages, understands business concepts intuitively, and stepped forward when it counted? I don't take chances on people like that. I invest in them. Before Lin could respond, Rebecca returned. All business. Lin, you'll need to return your uniform and collect your things, she said, then quieter. Quite the Cinderella story, isn't it? Just remember, when the clock strikes midnight, not everyone keeps the glass slipper. 2 days ago, those words would have stung. But Lin had changed. Thanks for your concern, Rebecca, she replied calmly. But I think I'll decide what world I'm cut out for. 3 hours later, Lin sat at the Vertex Technologies strategy table, dressed in a borrowed blouse and skirt. Not a uniform, but not quite executive attire either. She listened carefully, unsure when or if to speak. Then Jackson turned to her. Lin, you've been quiet. What's your perspective on the Huazhong partnership terms? Every eye turned to her. Lin could stay safe or speak up. I think the approach might be missing important cultural context, she began, voice steadying. In Chinese business relationships, trust building comes before contractual details. The detailed term sheet might be seen as aggressive rather than thorough. She explained concepts of face, indirect communication patterns, and long-term relationship expectations in Chinese business culture. As she spoke, heads nodded. Jackson watched her with approval. By meeting's end, she had shifted from silent observer to valued contributor. Melanie, Jackson's chief of operations, approached afterward. We're finalizing your paperwork. The salary is competitive, about 5 times what you were making as a housekeeper. Is that acceptable? Lin blinked back tears. Yes, that's more than acceptable. Melanie smiled. Good. Jackson says you're essential to this partnership. Essential. The word echoed in her mind as she exited the hotel. This time through the grand lobby, not the service hallway. The city outside looked different, brighter, possible. At the bus stop, Miguel was waiting. Heard there was some excitement upstairs, he said, grinning. Something about a housekeeper becoming a business executive. Lin smiled. How do you always know? I pay attention, Miguel said, to everyone. She hesitated. I'm scared. What if I'm not what they think I am? Miguel nodded. Fear and excitement feel the same in your body. The only difference is the story you tell yourself. He looked at her. So what's your story, Lin Wei? That you're lucky, or that you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be? As the bus approached, he gently nudged her forward. Some lights once lit, don't go out. On the ride home, Lin caught her reflection in the window. No longer hunched or hiding, she sat tall, facing the future. And for the first time in years, she felt something powerful and unfamiliar. Hope. The next 3 weeks were a blur of transition. Lin juggled learning corporate systems, translating documents, and preparing for her first official business trip to China. Jackson had assigned her to work directly with the international development team, whose director, James, was surprisingly patient and encouraging. You're picking this up faster than most MBA graduates, James said one day. It's like you've been preparing for this your whole life. Maybe she had been. The languages she once learned out of necessity had become a bridge to her future. The day before her first business trip back to China, Lin video called her grandmother in Shanghai. I'm coming home for business, Nai, she said in Mandarin, with a company badge that has my name on it. Her grandmother wiped tears. I always knew your mind was too big for a broom closet. That night, a message lit up her phone. Hotel bar? Perhaps one farewell drink? Miguel sat at the bar, out of his maintenance uniform for once. Look at you, he said warmly. You carry yourself different now. Lin smoothed her new blazer. It still feels like dress up, like someone's going to realize I don't belong. That feeling never completely goes away, Miguel said. Some people are just taught from birth to ignore it. As they shared a quiet moment, Lin asked, "Why did you believe in me?" Miguel's voice softened. Because 30 years ago I was you. Different story, same fear. I missed my chances. Helping you? Maybe it's my way of changing that. Lin smiled. It's not too late for you either. Miguel chuckled. Actually, I applied. Facilities director at the new art center. Watching you reminded me there's still time for one more adventure. As they parted, he handed her a small jade pendant. My mother gave me this for luck. Now it's yours. The next morning at San Francisco International Airport, Lin joined the Vertex Technologies team, heart racing. Boarding was interrupted by a familiar voice. Rebecca, now joining the trip as a hotel hospitality consultant. Rebecca offered a cool smile. Hotel management thought it best someone experienced represented our hospitality partners. Jackson's eyes narrowed. I wasn't aware of this addition. Lin kept quiet, rattled but composed. During the 13-hour flight to Shanghai, doubts crept in. Could she truly belong at that table? Or was she just a translator in a borrowed suit? Shanghai's skyline dazzled yet felt familiar. At the luxury hotel, old instincts kicked in as she unconsciously assessed the room's cleanliness. The line between who she was and who she was becoming blurred. The next morning, Melanie came to escort her to Jackson. Lin feared the worst, but instead found him calm. Do you know why I brought you here? He asked. Because I speak Mandarin. Jackson shook his head. I have 24 bilingual employees. I chose you because when others froze, you stepped forward. That kind of courage can't be taught. In the negotiation room at Huazhong Technologies, Lin steadied herself. CEO Zhang greeted her warmly in Mandarin. So you're the voice from the phone. Jackson told me your story. Impressive. Lin responded confidently. Throughout the meeting, she became more than a translator. She bridged cultures, explained subtleties, and smoothed misunderstandings no translation app could detect. By day 2, her presence was essential. Even Rebecca had to acknowledge her. You're doing better than I expected, she said during a break. But let's see how long this fairy tale lasts. Lin didn't respond, because she no longer needed to. Miss Wei, CEO Zhang approached moments later. I'd like to continue our discussion about regional expansion strategies over dinner. The surprise on Rebecca's face said it all. That night, Jackson raised a toast to new beginnings and to seeing the extraordinary in plain sight. Later, on the hotel rooftop overlooking Shanghai, Lin reflected on her journey from housekeeper to international business liaison. The transformation wasn't in what she learned. It was in finally being seen, and more importantly, seeing herself. Rebecca joined her, subdued. I underestimated you, Lin smiled. So did I. Jackson appeared, gazing out at the skyline. What's next for you? Lin looked out, steady. I think I'd like to help build bridges between cultures, and not just through translation. He smiled. I think that can be arranged. Lin touched Miguel's jade pendant, thinking of a Chinese proverb her grandmother loved. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Hers had started with a single act of courage, a choice to speak up. That step had carried her farther than she imagined, and it was just the beginning. 1 year later, Lin stood at the podium in the Horizon Hotel ballroom, the very hotel where she once pushed a cleaning cart. Now all eyes were on her as Director of Asian Markets at Vertex Technologies. Transformation isn't always about becoming someone new, she said confidently. Sometimes it's about finally becoming who you already are. In the crowd, Jackson watched proudly. Beside him, Miguel, now facilities director at the Bay Area Cultural Center, nodded with quiet pride. When I first stood in this hotel, I believed I belonged in shadows. I buried my talents, convinced they weren't valuable enough to share. Lin's voice didn't tremble, it rang with clarity. She glanced at Rebecca, hotel staff, and executives, some of whom once overlooked her. My turning point. A conversation in a language I wasn't supposed to understand. I'd studied out of necessity, never imagining it would lead here. Melanie smiled from the front row. This year taught me that our greatest limitations aren't external. They're the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve and when we're enough. She held up Miguel's jade pendant. A wise friend once said, "The things you're best at might never be seen, but don't let them die in silence." That changed me. Lin's voice grew stronger. We often wait for permission to shine, but worthiness isn't granted, it's claimed. When we choose to stop hiding, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. In the back, housekeepers and kitchen staff, invited as guests, listened with rapt attention. Last year, I cleaned rooms here. Today, I lead international partnerships. The difference? I gave myself permission to be seen. As applause thundered, Lin stepped away from the podium and caught her reflection in the glossy surface. No longer the girl who shrank from attention, but a woman who had stepped fully into her light. Later, she stood with Miguel at the reception. "Not bad for two people who used to be invisible," he said with a wink. Lin smiled. "I think about that day a lot when I almost didn't enter that room. Everything could have been different, but it wasn't," Miguel replied, "and that's what matters." A young woman in a housekeeping uniform approached shyly. "Miss Wei, I just wanted to thank you. Your story really spoke to me." Lin took her hand warmly. "What's your name?" "Maria," she replied. "Well, Maria, whatever dream you're carrying, don't let go of it. It matters." As Maria walked away, Miguel murmured, "Look at you, passing it forward." "It's the least I can do," Lin said. "Someone once did the same for me." Across the room, Jackson brought over CEO Zhang, now a close business partner. "Zhang says your leadership style should be taught in business school," Jackson grinned. Zhang nodded. "In my culture, we say the quietest voice often carries the most wisdom. You've proven that." Later, Lin stepped onto the terrace, gazing over the glittering San Francisco skyline. She pulled out her phone and showed her grandmother her office, with its view and her name on the door. "We did it, Nai," she said in Mandarin. "Just like you believed we could." Inside, she caught the eye of a housekeeper adjusting flowers, head down, unnoticed. Lin smiled. The woman returned it and straightened just slightly. In that moment, Lin understood her journey wasn't just about titles or achievements. It was about visibility, of self, of others. The courage to be fully seen and to see others fully. Because the most powerful gift we offer isn't our success, it's our authentic selves. If Lin's journey stirred something in you, an untold dream, a quiet voice, a hidden gift, don't let it stay buried. Your voice matters, your dreams matter, and the world is waiting. Let's step into the light together.